Despite 2020 being an absolute dumpster fire of a year, it would be a bit unfair to say there was nothing good about it. I just can't definitively think of anything other than these books, and that's probably not entirely fair. There was some good stuff somewhere probably I'm not thinking of. But back to this. So, best books like worst books, I think, have to be measured in a certain way differently than a bad book. So in other words, I would say when I say like a bad book, or like I did earlier last time, books I regret reading, these books aren't inherently the best books of 2020 in the same way that these were definitively the best of the best of 2020. I never do look, hey, this book sold the most, this book, changed everything for the best. There's a reason why Doomsday Clock is on this list. And that's because while Doomsday Clock has a lot of great moments, I felt the overall product didn't quite work. And there were also some books, like say for the worst books, a lot of people say Batgirl issue 50 was one of the worst comics of the year. I didn't read that. I didn't care enough about Batgirl to read it, which is sad. But I think you get what I'm saying here. Whenever I do these lists, the idea is which book resonates a certain feeling from me. Whether it is a moment that says, like, you know what, this means I'm taking off my pull list, or like, you know what, this was fine. This was great. This helped me appreciate other books that came out. In other words, these books are sort of like palate cleansers. They get the palate ready to objectively appreciate another book that's coming up. And does that mean that I don't appreciate them? Far from it. I love a good palate cleanser. Alright? View it sort of like Sprite. Alright? Sprite's always good. Alright? Or, if you want to be technical, steak sauce. You know what? We're ranting. Actually, we're rambling at this point. Let's stop. Let's just go into these books. So, first up is X-Men Fantastic Four by Chip Zdarsky. 2020 is the year, if anything, I discovered Chip Zdarsky as someone I feel I can trust when it comes to Marvel. It's not that I go out of my way to avoid Marvel books. It's just that I haven't found a run, or even really a title, that keeps my full attention for the entirety, let alone one that I feel I should just keep reading. For example, I was reading Jason Aaron's Avengers for about 15 issues, and then I'm like, you know what? I just don't care. I just don't. I put it away. Same with Doctor Strange and the Fantastic Four. It just doesn't work. But Zdarsky was able to, in addition to getting me to read Daredevil, which, yeah, we'll talk about that in a different video, but as well as Fantastic Four and the X-Men, which is appropriate because Dan Slott's Fantastic Four is just kind of meh, and the X-Men, I have a weird relation with the X-Men, but whatever. So the premise of this book is that the X-Men of Krakoa want to recruit Franklin Richards, the son of Reed Richards and Sue Storm, to their mutant nation, as he is an Omega-level mutant, and one ensues a battle of good intentions masked by arrogance and stupidity on both sides. Whether it be the fact that Charles chooses to essentially tell them, like, hey, your child belongs with us, he'll never be treated normally outside, unless he's on Krakoa, he belongs there. Or Reed, dampening Franklin's mutant gene so he can't go through, not telling Franklin this is what's going on, essentially denying Franklin the choice. Reed and Charles really do come off as the bad guys here, with the only difference being Reed is generally making an effort. Reed even calls Charles out, like, in like 2 years, Frank will be a legal adult and do whatever he wants. He can go to Krakoa, he might even stay, but you seem to have a time clock, and that's what concerns me, which is never brought up, by the way. Charles never addresses that. The book, I think, nails characters like Ben Grimm, aka The Thing, who has a talent for coming off as the most level-headed in these situations, whether it be here, Civil War. He's always been the one with sort of like the right idea, and I think it's because he's such a grounded character. Reed always thinks of like so far into the future. Sue is so grounded onto principles, and Sue herself criticizes the X-Men because they don't feel like heroes anymore. They don't act like them. Ben Grimm is just a guy that sits down and says, hey, let's look at this another way. Like, I'm no big city genius or some amazingly dignified hero that can do everything. No, I'm just a guy. And that's what's fun about this story at the end of it. Even if some places didn't quite make sense, it was still a great story to read, and it was nice to just see the X-Men there. And, of course, Doctor Doom, letting everybody know what's going on, even giving Charles the business. That was all great. And Doom seems to be right. Doesn't make him a good person, just makes him right. I think that is Doctor Doom in a nutshell. Speaking of which, Doctor Doom, written by Christopher Cantwell, was a fascinating book. All right, was it groundbreaking? No, not really. I don't think. I think the last groundbreaking thing Doctor Doom did was Be Iron Man, honestly. But this book poses a question of what if there was a version of you that lived the life you'd always dreamed of, and this premise here is great because Doom's been having dreams/visions of another version of himself living said life, and at the same time, he's being mocked and ridiculed for his distrust of Reed and Stark's new invention, which, if you've read Marvel, know that it's perfectly natural and even intelligent to be suspicious of anything Reed and Stark do. Especially with something like putting a black hole on the moon to deal with air pollution. Alright? Yeah. Say that out loud to yourself. Things get worse when it looks like Doom has intentionally sabotaged the plan, and Doom must find a way to clear his name and find out about this other Victor Von Doom. What's really interesting about this story is you get the idea that Doom he wants to succeed, essentially. He wants his view of the world to come true, which is a unified planet. Everyone's at peace, no child knows hunger. He'd also like people to like him, I think, on some level. He'd like to be liked, and a lot of this story is about Doom trying to let go, even being told to let go by other people, by his friends, by some of his enemies. Like, you're more than you think. Ultimately, Victor doesn't like himself. I think that's sort of the idea. Like, despite all the bravado and everything else, this is a man that doesn't like himself and uses his arrogance and his resources and even the cause to sort of hide himself from that. At least that's how I think he's portrayed here. It's not really groundbreaking, it's something I think a lot of people already knew, like Doctor Doom scholars. Doom scholars probably already knew this. Again, it sort of goes to the idea that there's really nothing to discover in comic book, just new takes on it. And Doom's a great character because he's a complicated figure in Marvel, and he's oddly enough more like a less serious version of Sinestro or Black Adam, yet also with the ego, like twice the ego of those two. Next is Justice League Dark. Now, Justice League Dark is an interesting comic because it's one of the few here that I've read that are still going on that I think I'm just done with. And I'm not done with it because it's made a bad decision. There was no singular page that said, like, you know what, I'm just done. It's run its course for me as a reader. And in ways, it's similar to Doctor Strange's Death of Magic story. After the first attempt to have magic die, they did a lot with Doctor Strange for some reason, I was just sort of done, like, you know what, this is good, and I don't need anything else from it. And Justice League Dark's been going on for about 2 years, and its first story is finally ending. The battle between Diana's forces and the Upside Down Man is essentially over, and we've seen some great moments from characters like Man-Bat, Constantine, Swamp Thing, Khalid Nassour as Dr. Fate, Kent Nelson as Dr. Fate, Zatanna always delivers, so it was great to see that, and now that this story is over, I don't really need to keep going, especially with the future state. I really don't need to keep going. At this point, I'm content to just wait for trades to come down, especially since James Tynion and Ram V, I think, are leaving the book. I know Tynion has, to an extent. I think Ram V is going to leave too, so I don't really need anything else. What I did need, though, was Wonder Woman Dead Earth. Alright, so Wonder Woman books are hard to find and even harder to enjoy. And what I mean is, lately, Wonder Woman as a character seems to be poorly handled. I think this is the best way to say it. And I think the problem is she needs another book. Like, she needs a detective or an action comics to accompany her main book. And I think the problem has always been is that no writer that's come onto this book has had any real understanding of the character. And that's not to dig on people like Greg Rucka, who I think definitely understands Wonder Woman. But after Rucka, everyone else just wants to present these ideas or story ideas. Granted, James Robinson, I think, had an interesting idea. He tackled something else. The problem was that none of the writers that have come in have really set a real tone for her character. They've thrown things at her. Like the concept of a just war is really just half an idea that Diana goes through, and I don't know. Like, the book has never really had any real staying power, and I think it's because there's nothing real big about a Wonder Woman event. Darkseid came back in Wonder Woman, by the way, and no one talked about it. No one felt that was important enough to read or talk about. I certainly didn't, and I don't know anyone else who really did. It was like, oh, Darkseid's back. He came back in a Wonder Woman book. Yeah, it's fine. Dead Earth has a simple premise that I've always said Diana needed. Something to push her out of her comfort zone, thinking of in a post-apocalyptic world full of mutated monsters where her powers are essentially gone and her friends are long since dead. That's a great, simple premise in itself. Diana must be a hero. She must restore hope to a world that has lost it. But the mystery that surrounds the state of the world, the last war, and the great fire, and how Diana ties into it, I feel makes the story, as well as Diana's principles, are pushed here. And I've always felt that's something important that she doesn't really get to do enough of. So Batman and Superman have had their principles tested. Green Lantern's had his principles tested. Flash has had his principles tested. In other words, it's one thing to say you believe this. It's another thing to believe it and follow through with it when it's hard, and it will be so easy to just, and even beneficial to you, to throw them away for a moment. Wonder Woman Dead Earth has that moment for Diana. And whether she succeeds or fails at it, I'm going to leave that to you to find out. But this book was good. This was, it's sadly the best Wonder Woman story we've had in a while. And that's a shame in itself. Nothing against this story here. This story, chef's kiss. Speaking of another great story, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Katara and the Pirate's Silver. So, I'm not going to tell you anything about this other than Katara with pirates. That is all. Written by Faith Erin Hicks. This story is just... It's a simple episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Let's call it what it is. And who doesn't love an episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender that isn't The Divide? The Divide is kind of terrible. Actually, it's not terrible. It's just legitimately one of the few moments of filler in the series. But... overall, this story is fun. It plays around with its Book 2 era ATLA. That's a good headspace to be in. There's some things that we'll see in this book that will come into play later in Book 3. That's actually really cool, I think. We've got some special guests from characters we've never seen before, like the Fire Nation and pirates. These are not the pirates from the Water Scroll, which I think is good and bad at the same time, but whatever. This was a fun book. It was nice to be remembered of ATLA in its heyday. And when we just weren't going, hey, Legend of Korra did this, ATLA did it better. It's nice to be there. And finally, we have Last Ronin. So it usually goes against the rules for me to talk about a book that has just started for a best books list. I usually like to wait for a story to really, get going, get momentum. Let me see, okay, this is where it's going, this is what it's doing. Okay, this is actually a really good book. But considering that this book has not only had its first issue delayed, its second issue is being delayed. It was supposed to come out, actually, issue 2 was supposed to come out, I think, in November. It got pushed back to December. Then it got pushed back to January. Then it got pushed back to February. So, yeah, you know what? We're just going to say, this book is trying. And Last Ronin is, despite how I feel about the reveal of who the Last Ronin is, I still stand by that it should have been held on till later, the reveal. I'm generally excited about it for 2021. The character they chose for the Last Ronin is, again, not a choice I'd have made, but the setup of this first issue, what this character was going through, what's going through his head, I love every moment of it. The dialogue is sort of where it should go for this character. When you do an old man type of character, whether it be Old Man Logan, Old Man Hawkeye, Old Batman from Dark Knight Returns, at some point, you should always feel like, I do not believe for a moment that this is the character, that this was that character. And currently, the Star Wars community is having another discussion about whether or not Luke from The Mandalorian is the same character as Luke from Last Jedi. And I would personally say the evidence is not in yet. I'm just going to say it. You can make every argument you would for either one. I'm not saying one is more valid than the other. It's your headcanon. I'm still going to say evidence is not in yet. Last Ronin is promising a lot, and it's still the most promising thing going into 2021 for comic books, because Future State, it has yet to endear me to anything. Are there some interesting ideas? Some. It'll be nice to be seeing characters like Batgirl and Stephanie Brown and Cassandra Cain back. That'll be great, but that's kind of it. And the prices? No. There's rumors that comics going to be $5 from DC, and I'm like, you know what? That means I'm only buying trades. Have fun seeing have fun. That's all. Have fun. But back to Last Ronin. Again, I love the setup. I love the premise. Screw it, we'll say it. I love that Michelangelo, as cliched as it is for the happy-go-lucky one to be all dark and gritty, it played it up rather well. They played the setup to it rather well. Again, I wasn't sure which turtle was the Last Ronin until they told me, and even then, I still don't believe that it's Michelangelo. But anyway, that's my best books of 2020. I'll be doing another list at some point next year for just books I really like. I think the opposite of the books I regret reading, books I totally love that I read. Leave your thoughts in the comment section what your favorite books were of 2020. Actually, what are your favorite fandom moments of 2020? I would say ATLA and Last Ronin were the best fandom moments, because ATLA is a nice little reminder of ATLA again in its heyday. When I think the ATLA fandom and Legend of Korra fandom was like super excited for everything, and Last Ronin is a great moment for the Turtles because they haven't done this yet that I recall. And I'll catch you all later. This is Bucket Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching. As always, may your fandom serve you well.